Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Spotlight on Security Tech Insights. Today, I'm excited to talk to you with my special guest about multi-tier data resiliency with Cohesity and Pure Storage. Now, what does that really mean? Well, we're going to take a closer look at that in greater detail as we are joined by you today, but at a high level, this is about safeguarding your enterprise data from advanced cyber threats and the necessity of creating a defense in depth approach that will help deter malicious entities from compromising your systems. My name is Theresa Miller. I am the Senior Director of Technical Marketing at Cohesity, and today I am joined by Dan Kogan. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, Theresa. Hi, everyone. As you mentioned, Dan Kogan. I'm the Vice President of Enterprise Growth and Solutions for Pure Storage. What I look after is our ecosystem of solution partners and what we develop with them, like Cohesity in the cyber resilience space, but broadly across cyber resilience, AI, core data center, cloud, and a number of other areas, and the go-to-market strategies associated with those multi-party products that we develop.
That's awesome. So you and I are going to talk about some really fantastic things today, including multi-tier data resiliency, but also what we're up to together as companies. So from an industry perspective, Dan, what are you seeing about why enterprises should be thinking about multi-tier resiliency?
Yeah, it's no secret, or I guess we haven't been especially quiet around the rise in the volume and the frequency of cyber attacks hitting companies really of all shapes and sizes, and the massive impact that's making on the business. And what that's really doing is forcing companies to think differently about their end-to-end cyber strategy, not just from the security and the pre-attack side of it, but also how they rethink backup and recovery and what they've traditionally done there to set themselves up to be better positioned against the increased threat vector that is out there hitting companies, again, of all shapes and sizes. And what you see out there really is that ransomware itself is becoming more targeted and destructive. It's not just encrypting files now, it's going after backups and primary storage. It's sitting quietly and silently within systems for weeks, maybe even months before the attack actually happens. And that's forcing companies, or it's making it critical for companies to have multiple protected recovery points across their different tiers to be ready for those kind of sleeper attacks. Maybe due to the volume of attacks and the increase there, you see a lot more compliance and regulatory pressures hitting the industries as well. In Europe, you have the DORA regulations, you have NIS2, you have a number of SEC cybersecurity disclosure rules and things like that. So ensuring data is recoverable quickly and securely after the event has now become a regulatory imperative, not just a business imperative for companies. And multi-tier resiliency is really built to deliver on those kind of strategies. And then you also have again, overall the growth and importance of data with this AI rush that we're seeing. Data really is, again, the new oil. I know it's a little bit cliche to say, but it's becoming that much more valuable really every day. And so the protection and the recovery of that data with these increasing threats, all of that is kind of coming together to shift the industry to this multi-tier resiliency strategy is what we're seeing.
Yeah, I find it really, I'm glad we're working on solutions for this when, it's the ransomware vector. You mentioned how that actually has changed so much over the years. I mean, the complexity of that and the fact that a traditional backup may not even be able to get your data back at this point, I think is pretty interesting. So when I think about what you just said around multi-tier resiliency, it's about having a defense in depth strategy specifically for recovery of your data, regardless of the attack, because the attack can be so different. It's not black and white anymore in terms of like disaster recovery used to be just pretty much natural disasters and very clear-cut things that you'd respond to. So I'm excited to talk about this a little bit more. So I think that's a good segue into how is this really different from traditional backup and recovery?
That's right. And
So,
so,
yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
so yeah, you kind of said it perfectly, right? Backup and recovery traditionally was built around hardware failures, accidental deletions, natural disasters, these kind of things, where a basic single tier approach of data periodically getting copied to secondary storage or even tape and then restored from there worked just fine. And then the time it took to do that restore could be measured in hours or days was acceptable. And the reality is none of those things are true anymore. So one of the first big differences between traditional backup and multi-tier resiliency is one, multi-tier resiliency is really designed for cyber resilience, not just data recovery. Whereas traditional backup, again, focused on compliance and DR and assumed data loss was a rare event and that you could restore in hours or days with multi-tier resiliency. It starts with the assumption that attacks are going to happen and that you need to be able to recover your data instantly, do it from multiple layers of protection, including the primary storage, the backups, and even air gap vaults whenever possible. The data needs to be immutable and tamper-proof in the multi-tier resiliency strategy versus modifiable backups kind of in the traditional world. And you really, so the way our solution is designed, right, is we have immutability at every single layer using our safe mode snapshots at Pure, which are on by default. And again, those can only be changed by calling into Pure support with a company specific PIN. So it really removes multiple layers of kind of human tampering within the chain. Cohesity is immutable backups. And so you've got multiple layers of that built into it. And then third piece here is really around instant recovery at scale versus a slow linear restores, which is how things kind of worked in the past with traditional backup, where again, prolonged downtime was acceptable. You had sequential recovery coming from tape or spinning disk, and that's kind of why. Versus in this new multi-tier resiliency world, the focus on mass recovery. Typically using flash-based storage and snapshot integration, allowing companies to restore thousands of VMs and files in minutes and really minimizing the business disruption.
Yeah, so you called out some really great differentiators, and I think that when you're an enterprise trying to adopt what will best serve the right level of restore from a cyber attack, I think it raises some questions around challenges. So, Dan, what are some of the biggest challenges that customers are going to face to evolve from this legacy backup and recovery solution mindset to this multi-tier resiliency model?
That's a great question. The first one is honestly a mindset shift, right? And I think backup teams and traditional backup and recovery teams, which I know those roles are already expanding, need to view themselves as well, typically in kind of the IT and the infrastructure side of the house, not necessarily in the security side of the house, need to view themselves as a core piece of the company's security chain. And a piece of that line of defense that goes into that end-to-end cyber resiliency model. So again, it's not thinking about using your backups in the rare events where you have a hardware failure or you have a natural disaster or you have something like that, but that those backups are really key recovery points in getting your company back online as a part of the overall end-to-end resiliency strategy. So it's a big mindset shift, and then with that again comes these kind of requirements that we talked about. But the first one is the backup administrators, the backup and recovery teams, and the infrastructure teams need to start to think of themselves as a critical piece of the overall company security landscape, and then act accordingly related to that. Another one is that they're able to bring immutability into the mix. That's a really key piece of this multi-tier strategy, but doing it without impacting performance on the overall business and finding a way to streamline that into just their daily operations. And again, with Pure Storage, we think of immutability as a non-negotiable. And so we have very, very space efficient, safe mode, immutable snapshots, not just built in the workflow of the product, but they're on by default. And it really is just, it is the way the environment operates. And you have to actually think to turn it off versus how do I turn this on and make that work. And then again, as this infrastructure is now that much more mission critical and getting company back online, and you're also putting more and more data into fast recovery tiers and multiple tiers, managing the cost and the storage efficiently to do that is another key piece of the changes. So more and more data, though, is going to have to live on faster recovery tiers. Fortunately, we see Flash has evolved a lot as a storage medium, and now we have multiple layers of performance and cost optimized all Flash tiers that enable companies to do that and store data really efficiently. But it's a rethinking of what the infrastructure looks like to support this new threat landscape.
Yeah, so there's still a lot to think about. When I step back and if I'm in the shoes of the administrator of the enterprise, and my focus is backups, I think I want to call out that I think enterprises are dealing with a moving target when it comes to being ready for cyber attacks. So you're only going to be able to be as prepared as you can be. But I think, Dan, you called out some really critical points that I really would love for our audience today to really reflect on. You talked about immutability, multiple copies of that data, being able to, I think you also mentioned like vaulting, being able to take that data and keep a copy of it somewhere else, and being able to actively do threat detection and scanning against that data, and so much more. You had so many great points there, but I think in terms of planning, our audience really should take a good think on what's been shared thus far, compare it against their environment. And lastly, backup teams need to be working with their security teams, which I think is also kind of a point you alluded to. So it's a big mindset shift ultimately. But I think enterprises can do this successfully.
Yeah, I think it's a great opportunity for backup teams to really elevate their function in a lot of ways. It's not just talking to security teams, right? It is really being a part of the security team in a matrix model. Obviously, I'm not suggesting backup teams are going to move under the CISO organization or anything like that, but they're an equally important pillar in that security chain now, and the role they play is that much more critical. So again, for those of us who've been in the industry for a while, this is a fantastic kind of moment where we see that much more importance being placed on these roles in this technology.
Yeah, that's such a great point. I really appreciate you sharing that, because backup and recovery typically wasn't considered very glamorous or interesting, and I think now it is. It just has to be. So great call out.
It's been interesting, but maybe you're right. Maybe not the most glamorous.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about Cohesity and Pure. So how do you see the Cohesity and Pure solution in the market helping customers solve their cyber resiliency challenges?
Yeah, I think of probably two main sort of takeaways or headlines, and one is instant mass recovery with high performance flash. So it's that instant recovery. That's a key word, is instant, and the scale that comes in with that. So again, where traditional backup systems rely on slow sequential recovery, and it takes a long time to recover from tape or hard or disk-based systems. That's not at all kind of how Pure and Cohesity have been architected, where we start with Pure FlashBlade on the file and object side, protecting with Cohesity, providing ultra fast, scalable performance for instant restores at scale. Talking massive scale, thousands of VMs and files in minutes, and reducing the downtime and the operational and ensuring operational continuity kind of on top of that. And so what we get, again, that headline comment really is enterprises can recover clean data faster than ransomware can spread. And that's one of the main things. The other one is really just end-to-end immutability and getting it from multiple points. I've talked a little bit about Pure safe mode snapshots, but then Cohesity also offering immutable backup. So we have multiple layers of immutability, this dual layer of immutability, It's a word to say too many times there. Preventing attackers from modifying data at any stage. And that's really ensuring clean recovery points exist no matter what. So when I think of those two things, that's really sort of the key is you're going to be able to recover very, very quickly at a high scale, and ensuring that you have clean data to recover from. And that to me is really the key and the key takeaway of what Pure plus Cohesity could deliver.
Yeah, I think that's extremely prolific. I think the key there is the clean data, because you hear about enterprises having reinfection incidents, and without the right tools in place following an actual incident where incident response has been invoked in, you definitely need that ability to scan that data. And when I think about the Cohesity side, to add on to what you shared, Dan, is that we do have threat detection capabilities with some of the best breed technology under the hood to help support that scanning that's needed to understand if the system is clean. Beyond that, we also have a partner ecosystem, our Data Security Alliance, that allows enterprises that might, on the security side, prefer to do their analysis of our detections within their tooling, such as SIM tools, and they have that ability as well. We can port our detection scans over to their system for that SOC integration, which also, Dan, when I think about when you brought up the fact that backup admins need to be working with their security teams, this is just another really important way to showcase the value of that alignment.
Yeah, and again, backup and infrastructure teams and storage teams are, very, very close in the organization. And a lot of those SIM systems you mentioned are actually sitting on Pure Storage as an example too. So it's another alignment point kind of between those teams. But I like what you said there, Theresa, because again, it's a multi-technology story at the end of the day, right? Spanning from, pre-attack security tooling all the way out to the backup and the recovery side of it, and kind of the after attack different points of recovery. And it can become pretty complex for customers to navigate through those different technology pieces and how they fit together. So, it's incumbent on vendors like us to really pull together the best piece of that ecosystem and create the integrations and the reference architectures and just the materials for customers to understand how best each of these pieces in the value chain sort of work together and can be implemented for the ideal solution.
Yeah. Well, that's a great segue into our last question for today. So in terms of key takeaways, what do you have for our audience today?
Yeah, I think it's just kind of recapping some of the major things we talked about is one, certainly we see, and because of the need of the expanded threat landscape and how much more sophisticated ransomware is getting, as well as compliance and regulatory landscape that's also evolving, is our traditional backup and recovery teams need to also evolve and evolve the way they think, evolve the way they work, and move from backup and recovery to multi-tier resiliency. And that really becoming kind of the new mantra. And then to do that, it's going to require a mindset shift, but it's also going to require a technology and tool shift. And then, how can we as partners, technology partners to those customers, help them successfully navigate the transition and do it in the most cost-effective and least disruptive way to business.
Wonderful. Dan, thank you so much for joining me today to share your thoughts.
Thank you for having me. It's a really enjoyable conversation, and I hope customers found some value in this.
Yeah, agreed. And thank you, everyone, for joining us for our latest episode of Spotlight on Security Tech Insights.